Welcome to this travel and history tip, and today I will be taking you to the graves of some famous guitarists. When we go to different places, we often go to the site called Find a Grave to see who is buried in the region that is famous. We have been to many famous guitarist graves, so I thought, well, I'll just do a tip on that. And the first one that we will be going to today is the grave of Stevie Ray Vaughan. And here you can see how the write-ups are set up on Find a Grave. It gives their birth, their death, and where they are buried, usually a photograph so it's easy to find the grave. He was a rock and blues musician, and he was born in Dallas. He is buried in Laurel Land Memorial Park in Dallas, Texas. He had a time period of personal decline, and he actually collapsed on stage in 1986 due to alcohol and drug overindulgence. We'll find that as a common theme today. He did go to rehabilitation, but another common theme that we'll find today is that he was actually killed in August of 1990 in a private helicopter crash while traveling in thick fog in Wisconsin after leaving a concert. So this was a very tragic end to Stevie Ray Vaughan's life, who was a very talented guitarist. Next up is Les Paul. His original name was Lester William Pulsfuss, and we'll also notice that some of these people changed their name. He was born in Waukesha, Wisconsin, and he is buried there at the Prairie Home Cemetery in Waukesha. He actually died at the old age of 94 in White Plains, New York, so he did not have a tragic ending or a shortened life. But he had some interesting accomplishments, and I want to read from this. He is known as a Wizard of Waukesha and the father of the solid body electric guitar. He is the only person in both the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and the National Inventors Hall of Fame. Les Paul forever changed the recording industry with his innovations of multi-track recording, overdubbing, electronic reverb, guitar effects, phase shifting, and more. Having his name on one of the world's best-known electric guitars, the Gibson Les Paul, recognizes his innovations in developing the solid body electric guitar. The Les Paul guitar, introduced by the Gibson Guitar Company in 1952, is the rock musician's definitive guitar. He had quite an elaborate grave site, we'll call it, and there was a quote by him: "Every setback might be the very thing that makes you carry on and fight all the harder and become much better." Les Paul. At many of these places, the accomplishments of the guitarist are placed on granite stones outside of their graves. In 1938, he headed to New York, where the Les Paul Trio became part of the Fred Waring's Pennsylvanians. Les became the first person to play electric guitar on nationwide radio after nearly electrocuting himself in 1941. Les headed back to Chicago, where he was music director for WJJD and WIND radio at this time. Les first approached Gibson with his solid body guitar, affectionately dubbed the Log. It took 10 years of Les's persistence until 1952 before Gibson accepted his invention, and the iconic Gibson Les Paul guitar was born. In 1943, Les headed to California for stints with NBC, Armed Forces Radio, and Bing Crosby. An early Ampex tape recorder from Bing led to Les' invention of the 8-track tape recorder in his famous garage recording studio. Les created recording innovations that are used in all music genres. Next stop, Renton, Washington, in the burial site of Jimi Hendrix. James Marshall Hendrix was born in November of 1942 in Seattle. He died at the young age of 27. He is known as one of modern rock music's most influential figures on the electric guitar. He self-taught himself how to play a right-handed guitar when he was a young boy, specializing in Southern blues style. When we went to his grave that day, there were several guys just playing guitar underneath the, I'll call it the little rotunda there. But he had a terrible death. The coroner's report said that the cause of death was suffocation due to inhalation of vomit. It's been claimed that it was either an overdose of drugs or suicide, but those claims have been disputed. But regardless, this was only a 27-year-old, essentially boy, whose life was tragically ended. Another young man, also age 27, whose life was taken, is Kurt Cobain. He is famous for the grunge group Nirvana, and we went to his memorial site in Aberdeen, Washington, which is his birthplace. He was cremated and his ashes were spread across different places in Washington, and we found this memorial to him, and it's not in really great condition, but it is something, and that's all that remains of Kurt Cobain in some respects. He left a wife and a daughter. He apparently took his own life into his own hands after also struggling with with drugs. Next stop is Carthage, Texas, and the gravesite of James Travis Reeves. He was born in Galloway, Texas, and he died at the age of 40, which is also very young. He is buried at what is the Jim Reeves Memorial Park on the east side of Carthage, Texas. He died in 1964. During the 1960s, he toured extensively throughout the world, from the British Isles, South Africa, India, European countries, and the Scandinavian countries, making him one of the first country artists to achieve international stardom. There is a Texas Historical Commission marker at his gravesite. Born in Galloway, James Travis Reeves played professional baseball for the St. Louis Cardinals minor league team until an injury forced him to abandon that career. He became a radio disc jockey and formed a country western band. Joining the Grand Ole Opry in 1955, he became a world-famous singer. Known fondly as Gentleman Jim, Gentleman Jim died when his Beechcraft Debonair, a single-engine plane that he was piloting, crashed into a wooded area during a violent thunderstorm, killing him and his manager, Dean Manuel. Less than 10 minutes from their destination, he radioed the Nashville airport that they were flying in an extremely heavy storm. Just minutes later, the control tower radioed to check if they had passed through the storm, but there was no response, thus realizing the plane had gone down. The hit records continued to be released posthumously, with songs such as Is It Really Over?, Blue Side of Lonesome, and Missing You. He also released a collection of Christmas and gospel songs. In the 1980s, Electrical created duets with Patsy Cline and Deborah Allen were successful. According to Billboard magazine, he had 51 top 10 hits, with 19 after his death. And the park is very well manicured and taken care of, and along the walkway they have this guitar design embedded into the sidewalk. It's done like an album inside the guitar. Time August 20, 1923, July 31, 1964. Producer, God. Next stop is Freddy Fender's grave. His original name was Baldemar Garza Huerta. He was born in June of 1937 in San Benito, where he is buried at the San Benito Memorial Park Cemetery. He is best known for his song Before the Next Teardrop Falls, a #1 hit on both Billboard magazine's country and Hot 100s charts in 1975. It sold over 1 million copies. Governor George Bush endorsed him to have a star in the Walk of Fame, in the Hollywood Walk of Fame. In the plaza, they have all his honors and awards that he has accomplished throughout his lifetime. He died at the age of 69 in 2006. Next stop, Montgomery, Alabama, and the Oakwood Cemetery, where Hank Williams Sr. is buried. He was born Hiram King Williams in September of 1923, and he died at the young age of 29 in January of 1953. He was a singer, a songwriter. He received international acclaim for his traditional style country music with its bluesy and a honky-tonk voice. Having a dozen singles to reach #1 on the top 10, the list of his hits is long, given that he lived only 29 years. He is regarded as one of the most significant country music artists of all time. He was born with a mild, undiagnosed case of spina bifida occulta, a disorder of the spinal column which gave him lifelong pain, a factor in his later abuse of alcohol and other drugs. In 1951, Williams fell during a hunting trip in Tennessee, reactivating his old back pains. Later, he started to consume painkillers, including morphine and alcohol, to ease the pain. His alcoholism worsened in 1952, and in June, he divorced Audrey Williams, and on August 11th, Williams was dismissed from the Grand Ole Opry for habitual drunkenness. His performances were acclaimed when he was sober, but despite the efforts of his work associates to get him to show sober, his abuse of alcohol resulted in occasions when he did not appear or his performances were poor. Author Colin Escott concluded in his book, Hank Williams, The Biography, that the cause of death was heart failure caused by the combination of alcohol, morphine, and chloral hydrate. The president of MGM told Billboard magazine that the company got only about 5 requests for pictures of Williams during the weeks prior to his death, but over 300 afterwards. The local record shops sold out of all of their records, and customers were asking for all records ever released by Williams. His final single release during his lifetime was ironically titled, I'll Never Get Out of This World Alive. Your Cheatin' Heart, which he's most well known for, was written and recorded in 1952, but released in 1953 after his death. The song was #1 on the country charts for 6 weeks. Many of you may know of his son, Hank Williams Jr., and he has this plaque on there. Please do not desecrate this sacred spot. Many thanks, Hank Williams Jr. This is all a part of American history. Learn it, love it, appreciate it. Don't let them steal our history. Treasure our American history. And if you enjoy these travel and history tips, you might consider getting my books, Off and On, The Beaten Path, The Unclassic Road Trip. There's the Eastern Edition, the Central Edition, and the Western Edition. They're $18 each, plus shipping. And they have interesting stops like this, because I cover a section on famous people from each state. Help us grow our channels by hitting the subscribe button, the notification bell, and liking. Follow us on Insatiable Travelers. And if you appreciate our content, tell others and repost on your social platforms. Thank you.